So we really do have a problem of how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be very difficult to change that unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way, because you do need both.
But it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere.
We're talking about one of the greatest public health challenges of our lifetime.
Every day, the pandemic clock is ticking.
Flu is the thing on Earth that is most likely to kill many, many people.
And if we take that scenario that Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation funded from the Institute for Disease Modeling that says if we had another outbreak like a pandemic virus today, what we saw in 1918, in that 6-month time period, we would have 33 million people dead. And not only that, that virus would have been seeded all around the globe. And 2 months after that, our best technologies to make vaccines would start releasing vaccines.
So as part of my life, I teach at Stanford, and people use this word in Silicon Valley, which I mostly hate, but I'm going to use it now, disruption. Why don't we blow the system up? I mean, obviously we can't just turn off the spigot on the system we have and then say, hey, everyone in the world should get this new vaccine we haven't given to anyone yet. But there must be some way. I'm not a representative of industry, but I'll pretend I'm one. I make a flu vaccine every year, and it sells, and it protects people to the degree that we can expect.
So you have no incentive. Right.
Why the hell would I go spend $400 million to do this thing, which may be great, and then if it's really great, you give it once or twice or 5 times.
And that's where the federal government comes in.
Well, yeah,
seriously.
With all your money.
Yeah. No, seriously, what happens is, in fact, you bring up an excellent point. Our responsibility to the public health and not the profit line has to be able to push the process to the point where industry will find it to their benefit to do that. I think if you're going to sit back and wait for a company that's been growing virus in eggs for the last 30 years to spontaneously change without any incentive, without any de-risking, it's just not going to happen. Whereas with influenza, for some people, they go throughout life, it doesn't impact them at all. There isn't anybody that's afraid of influenza. You go in a focus group and you say, are you afraid of getting HIV if you're at risk? Oh, absolutely. Are you afraid of getting cancer? Absolutely. Are you afraid of the flu? Don't bother me. I mean, that's the reality of how people perceive flu. So we really do have a problem of how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be very difficult to change that unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way, because you do need both.
In the long run, over time, amortized, if the 2009 pandemic had been much more deadly, would that have ended up being a better thing for humanity?
The sad truth is that when there's a major crisis, it focuses attention and usually resources, and some significant mobilization follows. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are using resources in the best way possible, though, because it's done in the moment of crisis, and there's throwing money at things that sound good without them being thought through, and then there's what we used to call the U-shaped curve of concern, where there's the initial increase in interest in resources, and then when the problem fades and other problems emerge instead, then everything drops off.
Let's talk about the science a little bit more. Craig Venter, who is a controversial person, but interesting to me, has written that he thinks we ought to have a vaccine such that if you take off in a plane from Hong Kong and are infected, by the time your plane lands in New York, there ought to be a vaccine assembled and deliverable to you. How crazy is that? How far are we from that? Are we ever going to get there?
I'm not going to say how far away, but I don't think that's too crazy. I think that if we move towards the era of synthetic-based vaccines, I think we remove the dependencies of thinking the vaccine has to be something that we have to grow into something else, in an egg cell or an insect cell, any type of dependency on growth. if we can move into more synthetic, the nucleic acid-based, messenger RNA-based, those sequences can be rapidly shared around the world. Enzymes that can synthesize the small fragments of messenger RNA necessary to go into vaccine can be made in a shoebox size system right now, which is translatable into a 3D printer-like or inkjet printer-like thing. Now, putting those in a system to print those on a patch that a self-administered vaccine could happen, the technologies are out there. We haven't demonstrated their true effectiveness and ability for a vaccine, but it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere. We could get the RNA sequence from that, beam it to a number of regional centers, if not local, if not even in your home at some point, and print those vaccines on a patch and self-administer. We're a ways out, but the technology is there to be adapted and assembled to put in that futuristic view of a rapid response to an emerging novel.
So getting back to what you ultimately want to do, and I think Casey mentioned it, when you do get a universal flu vaccine, you're going to want to give it to 6-month-old kids.
I think what we really have to think about is how to align the different capabilities, the different funding streams, the different incentives towards a common goal. And for industry, I think it is really, really important for them to not feel that they're just going to sort of walk off a cliff with a completely new approach without any idea whether it will be successful. So I think, what we've seen in various areas, and certainly a lesson I learned when I was Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, is that the sooner everybody can sit at the table, government, industry, academic, researchers, and in many cases, the people who are actually going to have to either consume or deliver the product as well, and really together map out a plan and sort of identify what are the critical questions to ask and answer, what are the unknowns scientifically, what are the unknowns in terms of the regulatory process, and what's the level of risk that people are willing to accept, and how can we reduce some of that either through financial incentives or guaranteed purchase.
I think an infusion of more resources would bring people into the field that would not normally be into the field, because scientists do that. They do things that are interesting to them, but they also follow the money.